Hello, players and pirates. My name is TB Skyn, and welcome to the card review for Legends of Runeterra, Beyond the Bandlewood City, YORDLE, the one with all the YORDLEs in it, where we're going to look at the cards in this particular expansion, and we're going to talk about the cards in this particular expansion, and all the stuff that is going on with the cards in this particular expansion, and discuss the art, the character design, the way that they're put together. I'll chat to chat a little bit, and chat will send me super chats while I'm trying to deliver a monologue to camera. And just hang out and discuss Legends of Runeterra character design and some of the redesigns that have been made for Legends of Runeterra. Like, as you can see on screen right now, Caitlyn and Nami both look substantially different than they do in their normal incarnation. Serath has become a much more bulky, roundish boy, which should be interesting to talk about. So, let me just check over the super chats. Daniel, hey Sky, I love your design bits and lore concepts as much as I may disagree with some of your opinions. I enjoy hearing on others' opinions on design. Yeah, I mean, everything I say is opinion. Like, it's very rare that I'm not a science YouTuber. I don't talk about facts. I talk about feelings, which is what art is. So, yes, I am perfectly happy that you disagree with me. I'm actually quite pleased with that, because if everyone just agrees with you all the time, you're probably doing something wrong. The Harbo, hey, how would you create an OC of Runeterra without them being champion grade? It seems everywhere is horrible unless your champion material exists to die in someone else's backstory. That's not true. You can live in Ionia pretty peacefully nowadays, like since the Noxian invasion has been repelled. You can live in Bandle City, be quite happy. If you have money and you live in Piltover, you're fine. If you have money and live anywhere, really. If you are a Demacian who's not a mage and who's like living in one of the outskirts villages or whatever, you're probably fine. So don't worry about it. Think Void champions will be spread across regions if they introduce the Void, and I don't think they will. But then yes, like that's absolutely what they're gonna do. But I don't think they'll make the Void as another multi-region thing. At least not yet. Well, actually, no, you know what? They probably will, but they've said that they won't. Anyway. Let's begin with our girl, Caitlyn, about whom I've already made a short, of course, who's received a not insubstantial design update for Legends of Runeterra, which is quite nice. This is a design where Caitlyn in her normal form looks like, I've said before, she looks like the porn parody of herself, because she's wearing like that extremely like short dress and like with a big cleavage and like this completely cartoonishly sort of misshapen silly hat, and like she looks like a sort of cartoon porn parody of her own concept, which is that she's the sheriff of Piltover, she's an accomplished detective, she's a law enforcement agent, and she's someone who doesn't like to have any fun whatsoever. Like she doesn't, like, Caitlyn is very much characterized as someone who's not about any sort of silliness. Like, she's very much that kind of character, so having her run around in that extremely sort of sexy sort of Halloween costume version of herself always completely misfit with her character. So, Legends of Runeterra has taken the natural step of saying, okay, how can we keep the aesthetics of the original costume, but then update it to something that doesn't look like it's completely counter to her actual personality? And the answer they came up with is, okay, we keep the dress, we keep sort of the aristocratic, upper-class Victorian ruffles and like frills and stuff, but then we make her dress more sensibly in other ways. So she has a jacket on, she's got like these thick leather leggings that she seems to be wearing. The straps around her legs now actually attach things to her, like pouches and stuff for tools and things that she uses. And they've sort of like, they've de-emphasized her bust a lot because she's not really a sexy character. Like, that's not really her thing, that's more like an Evelyn thing. So they've de-emphasized that, but they're sort of re-emphasizing the femininity of her shape a little bit with the belt right under the bust line to sort of like highlight where the boobies are, basically. And sort of, but without going like, hey boys, look at these big mommy milkers, and more like, hey, they are there, and she has them, right? And that to me makes a lot of sense, because like Caitlyn, when she's a detective, she spends her time running through Zon chasing down criminals or whatever, like it's full of rusty industrial equipment and shit, and if she scratches her leg on one of those, she'll get tetanus or something worse. Like, I don't know what diseases they have in Runeterra world. So like it's a sensible update of the character design. Like, I would like to see her rebuilt from the ground up rather than just sort of patchworked into something more functional, but that's just me. Anyway, let's talk about the composition, because what we have here is a scene where one character is delivering important information to other characters, right? And so how is this scene framed? There's a lot of different ways you can do it. You could frame it from the perspective of the audience, for example, and in that case, you'd put the air quotes camera in the crowd, and you'd have the audience in the foreground, like you'd see their heads. Boy, hiccups. You'd see like the back of their heads as they watch Caitlyn's presentation, and Caitlyn would be a relatively small figure, sort of at the very... Actually, I can show you one of those, because Legends of Runeterra has one. I'm just gonna need to do some, be honest here. Foundations, You might do something like this. We have exactly a scene to demonstrate the point. If you're having one character delivering a speech or some dialogue or some information to a group of other characters, you can do a shot like this one, where you place the audience for the card, like us, in the audience for the event that's happening in-game. So, like, we're part of the crowd, we're watching this character from far away delivering their, you are soldiers of the Noxian blah blah blah, and you shall blah blah die, blah 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 blah, from that perspective. And that puts this character in a certain position of power and authority over us, right? She's raised above us, she stands alone where everyone else is gathered in a mass. She's like the strong, powerful individual who's leading this discussion. And as you can see, like with the Trifarian, the entire card is framed around, like she has this frame right here, she has the banner in the middle, she's centered, she's got the highlights coming down with the sun where everybody else is in shadow. Like, so the whole card is just working to place this as like, this is the character who is delivering the important speech to the masses. Caitlyn's card doesn't do that. As I try to navigate my way through this interface back to... Hang on. Oh, right, Foundations away. There. Haha. This card doesn't do that. We are not in the crowd. We are not positioned away from Caitlyn. We are not alienated from her. Like, it's not a thing where, like, we're in the crowd watching her give us orders. We are positioned much more as part of a circle of equals, right? So we have the rest of the Piltover police, like, force sort of gathering around here, and you get the sense that there's this half circle around her, right? That they form this half circle around her. Everyone is sort of level. Everyone is at eye line, by the way. Caitlyn is not raised above the crowd. You can see her eye line is pretty level with the Archivist. It's in fact below this guy. So she's not raised up to this like position of authoritarian, sort of centered, sort of like she's not the great dictator dictating to the crowd. This is someone who's delivering information to a crowd of equals. The storytelling tells us so, that Caitlyn is delivering this to her fellow investigators with whom she feels a kinship. The same thing about us. Even though we are not like necessarily directly in the crowd, we still feel like we're part of that big half circle that's sort of around Caitlyn's desk, but we're up at the front. We're pretty damn close to her. We could probably reach out and touch some of her stuff. We are in her space. So, like, the storytelling here is very different from that, like, authoritarian storytelling. This is, oh, yes, our leader, whomst we respect, and we know them, and we talk to them, and we speak on a first-name basis, is giving us some important information about some stuff that they've been doing. Which gives a very different vibe and energy to the storytelling of the scene, and I really like it. Anyway, but we still need the storytelling to center Caitlyn, right? We still need her to be the main character of the card because it's her card. So how do we do that? Well, we create this scene that feels much more inclusive, that feels much closer, that feels much more like, yes, here's a bunch of colleagues discussing stuff together, but we still create a little bit of separation. So we have the window here behind Caitlyn, for example, this bright, like sheer white, basically, highlighted space behind her that sort of encompasses most of her body, acting as a little frame. To put her in there. That's the framing you all were asking for. And we have just a little bit of physical separation. Like, most of the crowd is, like, over here on the right. Caitlyn is over here on the left. And Caitlyn's stuff, like her big sort of mystery board, is over here taking up space to which she's directly connected. So the compositional element is that Caitlyn takes up just about half, right? Like, her and her stuff takes up about half of the card, and then the other half is mostly, like her desk and the other characters. So there's this proportionality to the way that space is dedicated to each set of characters that tells us who's the central character here, who's the most important character. And then the other thing we've also talked about before, highlighting a character through sheer detail, right? So if you look at, and I wish I could zoom in a little bit more here, but if you look at the characters in the background, what you'll notice is that they're painted a little bit more roughly. Like, you can see it especially on this guy right here, his face, right? It's not super highly detailed. It's not super cleanly painted. It's a little bit rough around the edges, and that's basically true for all the characters in the background. They are rendered, but they're not rendered nearly as much. Caitlyn is fully rendered. Like, everything about her is painted smoothly. Like, she feels very, very sort of present and real, and what that does, it mimics the effect of a camera. It mimics the effect of a camera where you have like a shallow depth of field, where one character is highlighted just by being in focus, and everyone else is just slightly a little bit out of focus, right? Then there's stuff we talked about before, color saturation. Caitlyn's colors are, broadly speaking, more saturated. Her contrast is, broadly speaking, higher than the characters in the background. You can especially see the contrast between Caitlyn and the detective here in the background, the insider. We'll talk about his card later. You can see how washed out he looks relative to her, and that's also something that brings her to the front, that makes her a more sort of in-focus character. And that sort of that repeats across the entire group. Like, you can see the browns, if you pay attention to the browns of the belt, for example, that's way more desaturated than the browns around Caitlyn's in Caitlyn's belts and shit. So yeah, like, there's a lot of little things going on that sort of that positions the one character as the central character, but without doing the obvious thing of just like putting them on a pedestal. Which I think is just a really nice little bit of storytelling there. I also like Caitlyn's pose. Like, I like the way that she's explaining, because she's like leaning towards the crowd and she's going, I found him over here. And it's like, she's explaining this thing, but she's not giving a lecture. She's like pointing to the board and explaining her theories. And like, it has a nice energy. I really like it. Anyway, something happened on my phone. Okay, it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. That's the level 1. Okay, there's 1,000 people here. Hello? You showed up all of a sudden. I'm pretty sure it was only like 400 last I looked. Hi, hope you enjoy the stream. Yes. Caitlyn. Oh, actually, yeah, we'll deal with that later. So here's her level 2. And actually, before we talk about that, let's find the spell card. So this is Ambush, which is, what is it, like, give a unit +2 plus blah blah. This is a better look at Caitlyn's new character design. Or new character design, her different outfit. This is Caitlyn essentially in her SWAT gear outfit thing, where she's doing the thing where she's like, we shall go and confront the villain in their lair, or whatever. And I quite like the spell card, first of all, but it's also an interesting way to reframe the character. This is something I talked about in my short, but the Piltover police, the enforcers, they're not the good guys. Like, not... they're not universally the good guys. They are the arm of an authoritarian government that's ruled by nobles that are massively corrupt. Like, they serve people like Camille, ultimately. Like, they're the people who bankroll the enforcers. And, like, so the Piltover enforcers are, like, not universally the good guys. Caitlyn is still a heroic character, obviously, but she's a heroic character working inside of an imperfect system. And so I quite like these character designs, because this shit is sinister. Like, these motherfuckers are scary. These are not like, oh, nice policeman coming along with your bobby hat to what is going on here? Like, they're not affable, they're not nice. These people look like they're gonna fucking kill ya. Like, this looks like the jackbooted thug beating down the doors of the underclass in order to do the thing. Like, enforce the authority of the hierarchy, whatever. And that, I like that that's there. Like, that there is that element of like, hey, wow, these people actually seem a little bit scary sometimes. Maybe... yeah, okay, maybe they're not universally the good guys. And that's going to be important, because in Arcane, of course, we're going to, like, this is talking about outside media. In Arcane, we're going to be following Jinx, or, well, Powder, as she's actually called, and Vi in the Sawn Undercity, as they're coming up, as they're sort of trying to live their lives down there among the criminals and among, like, the rowdier people in the gangs. And so, like, presumably the police will play some sort of antagonistic role there, because, like, they're gonna be doing crime. So, like, it's good to have a character design that can make them scary, that can make them fearsome, and that can make them, okay, yeah, this is, like, this maybe a little bit fashy, in some aspects of the uniform design. Works quite well, and Caitlyn also just looks scarier here. Like, this is a scarier version of Caitlyn than the one we see in her regular splash, in her regular art, because, like, here she's wearing, like, what looks like a pretty nice dress. Like, she's, oh yeah, it's like, it's a nice little costume thing, and then, like, when she's in military gear, it's like, oh no, this lady's coming here to murder you. So that's cool. And also, just because people brought it up, even though I was kind of tired of it, one silly thing about this is, like, that thigh gap there. Like, that's not... even people who have a thigh gap, like, even people who actually do have a thigh gap in real life, when they put one leg in front of the other, thighs overlap. Like, that... And this is how anatomy works. If you put one leg in front of the other, your thighs will overlap. That is geometry. That's how it works. How are you this fucking desperate for camel toe? Like, how are you that desperate for camel toe? It's not... Like, my god. It's so silly. It's so silly. Because, like, okay, she has a thigh gap. Fine, I guess. Like, not a lot of people do, and I don't know why everyone's so fucking obsessed with it. But when you put one leg in front of the other, there's not gonna be a thigh gap. There's just not gonna be a thigh gap. I mean, Jesus, unless you are extremely emaciated, there's not gonna be a thigh gap. So, it's just a dumb thing. Anyway, where were we? Right, the level 2 art. We need to talk about the level 2 art. Which is also sort of a conclusion of a storyline that's running throughout the cards. Because, okay, so this... God damn it, go back to the level 1. We need to explain this. So, the storyline of Caitlyn's cards, or the storyline of Caitlyn as a character, is that when she was a young girl, her family was targeted for assassination. Like, someone tried to kill her family, and as far as she could tell, like, as far as she could make out, it was some mysterious crime figure known as C. And the theory in the lore community for a while has been that Camille is this mysterious C, that she ordered the assassination because Camille kind of doesn't like Caitlyn's family being, like, nice to the Undercity Piltover people or whatever. With this update for Legends of Runeterra, that has been kind of disproved. It turns out that the mysterious C is, or might be, we don't know if it's a red herring, who knows, Corinna, who is a card we already know from the previous... Nope. There. Corinna, rather. Who is a card that also showed up in the Foundations as Corinna Verasa. Who's hanging out in Piltover and Son, does stuff with your spell cards. Grows Plants does a whole Poison Ivy riff with her character design. Who turns out to be the mysterious C. And what we see here is the aftermath of Caitlyn's level 2, where she's springing her trap to kill the police. All that stuff. Right, so Caitlyn's storyline for a long time has been about her trying to find this mysterious C, this person who targeted her family for assassination. So you can see the C hanging out on the pegboard here in the background, where she's like tracing and trying to figure out who is this mysterious C character. And so the level 2 represents a moment of confrontation where she finally finds C, and is surprised to find who it is, because it's Corinna Verasa, a person whom she knows, because Corinna is this lady right here in the background with, like, extremely conspicuous pink jacket and flower on her head. I don't know why Caitlyn couldn't, like, oh, hey, maybe this mysterious evil lady who has something to do with flowers, I don't know, maybe there's a clue? Maybe she's trying to tell you something? But yeah. That's Corinna right there, who's been an insider all along. And the reason why we need to know that is because there's some cards with Corinna where she shows up and it's like, a lot of story to explain here. It's not really a Holmes and Moriarty thing. Not really, bruh, funny bruh memes and more. It's not really a Holmes Moriarty thing because Holmes Moriarty, it doesn't matter. But yeah, it's the Nemesis thing, right? Where Caitlyn has been chasing this mysterious criminal in the shadows for ages, and it turns out to be someone that she already knows from her real life. Big twist, big shocker. So we need to talk about this card. I'm trying to get myself back on track here. So the card itself. Remember what we said about framing and stuff. Here, there isn't a lot of framing going on. Well, there is some, but for Caitlyn herself, who's the main character of the card, right? Well, she's a main character. There's not a lot of framing going on. Like, there's not an explicit sort of like, oh, yeah, we have the thing in the background that frames our character. Caitlyn here is made to stand out and be a central character simply by just being the tallest character in the room. Like, she stands alone. No one else overlaps her. No one else is in front of her. Like, Corinna's arm doesn't overlap her. She's, like, separated alone. She has light right behind her. Like, this spotlight literally shines a light on where she is. And there is a little bit of framing in that we have, like, the plants, and we have Corinna's arm that sort of carves out, like, a vaguely little bit of a frame, but it's really just that she's separated in the center of the image, alone, with light behind her, whereas everyone else is substantially more in shadow, but also, she's also the only character who has a face in this image. Which is another thing, like, the human brain is programmed to look for faces. That's why we can see, like, we look at a house and like, oh, 2 windows and a door, that looks like a face. A surprised face or whatever. It's like, we have this tendency in our brains, so when we see a face, it's like, oh, that's the main character. Even though the face is itty-bitty tiny in the image, we still identify, okay, Central, this is the only character who has a face, so we're going to focus on that first, because the brain looks for it. Yeah, pareidolia, as you say. Well, pareidolia is the tendency to see patterns in things, and one of the patterns that the human brain likes to identify is faces. So like that's what pareidolia. Pareidolia is not just faces; it's everything where we see patterns. But one of the patterns we look for is a face. So that's Caitlyn's Central, like with the gun pointed and then doing the dramatic pose thing, and all the other soldier dudes, all the other SWAT whatever people. They don't have faces. They have masks, they have, like, eyeglasses, they're covered up, so they become more like part of the furniture, like, they become more part of the background, which is quite well done. Anyway, Karina over here holding a detonator, because she's like, Caitlyn, yes, you have walked right into my carefully prepared trap. Prepare for drama! And then she activates it, and that's when we'll get to that once we get to the Karina Mastermind card itself. Right. Moving on to Nami, I think. Yes, let's do that. And I'll take a sip of tea, I think. Is it cold enough to... Yeah. Oh, Carlos Augusta Saraiva, thank you for that super chat. How goes my favorite YouTuber? Fun to see I came in at probably the best time. Sky and screaming about what god-awful hip area in the ambush art based. Yeah. It's like... It's one leg in front of the other. It's in front of it. Like, you can't have a gap between one thing where one thing is in front of the other thing. There can't be a gap between them, because they overlap! Jesus! Anyway. Nami. Yes, good, Nami. I like this card a lot. I like all of the Mirai cards. Like, all of, like Nami and all of her people, like, all of the people that are associated with her and all the cards that are associated. There's some fucking cool mermaids in here, man. 30 minutes in, one card down. Yeah, I know. Two cards. Caitlyn level 1 and 2. And we did the ambush card as well. Like, so 3 cards. We've done 3 cards. Be fair. It only took me 10 minutes for each one. What was the thing? Right, yes. I love the character designs of the Mirai. I love the character designs of all these deep sea creatures because they've gone really hard on making some different, more interesting mermaids. But Nami herself has had a minor character design update. Most specifically that she doesn't quite have as explicit fish titties anymore, which is always sort of the odd thing about, because the thing is, like, Nami is a mermaid. Okay, she can have mammary glands. Like, maybe mermaids feed their young from breasts the same way that dolphins do, or whatever. That's fine. No problem there. But the trouble with Nami was that, like, she didn't have any nipples. So, like, wait, so no, you can't really do that with the breasts if you don't have any nipples from them to feed. Anyway, so what they've done with Nami's character design here is they've sort of de-emphasized the tits a little bit. They've not taken away the shape. Like, you can still see that there's that bulging shape on top of her form that sort of suggests a bust, but they don't have that super explicit cleavage anymore. Like, they don't have, like, that really sort of, like, cleavage in all but name thing going on with her that they do in the base splash art, because it just raised more questions than it was worth for her to have the sexy fish titties. So there's a minor character design update there. There's also a few other things, like the shape language of her crown has been changed just a little bit. We've sort of emphasized a few things about the way her colors gradiate. Like, there's little things, little good changes that are quite nice. And just overall, it looks like a much more polished character design because they've done a lot of polish on it. Like, they took the base character design of Nami and went, okay, let's give this another pass. And it just looks much more nicely rendered. It just looks more nicely put together. I still think Nami is kind of a basic character. Like, she's a very basic mermaid character, and I feel like they could have been more creative with her, as indeed they have with the other Mirai, but it's a good little update for her. Anyway, framing. So the framing here should be fairly obvious because you can kind of see it, right? Like, you can kind of see how the what are they called? Jellyfish! That's what they're called, jellyfish. You can see how the jellyfish and, like, the seaweed and the corals and the whatever, and the Mirai Elder, how they all form this sort of little color shape for her to occupy. You can see how she's separate from everything. Like, none of the jellyfish, like, really overlap with Nami's bright. There's a little bit down here, but none of them overlap with Nami. The hand of the Mirai Sea Mother doesn't overlap. The staff doesn't even overlap with her. There's this separation of, like, separating out Nami specifically so that she can be, like, a central character. But this is a dual character thing. Like, because the secondary character, who's almost as much of a main character, is the Mirai Elder here, who's doing this blessing on her, like, sending her on her journey to become the Tide Caller. Which, so there's this duality between where you can see that the Elder is in a position of power over her. The Elder actually takes up more space in the image that Nami does, because she's the one with the wisdom, she's the one bestowing knowledge, she's the one sort of granting a blessing on the young Anshinu as she sets out on her quest. This is Nami when she's starting out, like, setting out from her home to save them from the monsters of the deep. We should probably recap Nami's lore, by the way. So Nami's people live deep in the sea. They're Vastaya. They're an ocean type of Vastaya. They live deep in the sea, and down below them, there is a void portal or something. There's something bad down there. It's probably a void portal as far as we know. And they have a magical artifact called a moonstone, which they are granted by the aspect of the moon. That would be Diana right now. That like needs to be charged up every 100 years or so with power from the moon in order to keep repelling the horrors from the depths. And if they don't get that moonstone, everyone's going to die. Which is why Nami is like, okay, fuck it, I'll be the tide caller. I'll go find the aspect of the moon and make her give us a moonstone so that we can all not die. So Nami has been on a long quest to find Diana, wherever the fuck Diana is right now. And that's her thing, is like she's this young, enthusiastic, sort of idealistic, bright-eyed hero setting out on a quest to save her homeland. It's like the intro to every JRPG, right? Like that kind of thing. Except hopefully her village won't be burned down. How would they burn down a village in the sea? I don't know. Right, I think there was some super chats. I'm going at 5 million miles an hour, and still I can only do one card per 10 minutes. Hello, Skyn. Thank you for all that you are and all that you do. It inspired me to use my League of Legends animation for my art class independent project last semester to compare using 2D and 3D animation together. You're the best. Well, good job, Sarah. That sounds interesting. Turtles of Pies. I love the backgrounds in Legends of Runeterra. They feel so unique in each card. Yeah, like the environment design in Legends of Runeterra is fantastic. There's some fantastic backgrounds. There's some fantastic, like, just the places that these people live just feel so good. Like, they feel so nice. They feel so realized. It's really good. We'll talk about that more maybe in some of the other cards. Laplace 2882. Hey, Skyno, at work right now, so I'm going to be popping in and out of the stream. Love the Mirai cards. They're so pretty. Yeah, they are. They're excellent. But yeah, and you can also see, like, the pose with, like, the Great Mother hovering sort of over Nami with this hand, like, imposing power upon it. You can see these little sparkles coming off her hand. Like, rendering them onto Nami, and Nami sort of much more turned inward. You can see her pose is like her chin is down, her chest is up, but her chin is down, so she's sort of turning in on herself, like with the hand as well touching to her heart, pretty much. So you can see that she's in the grip of some sort of feeling, like she's in the grip of some sort of emotion, some sort of an emotional thing that's going through her, whereas the Mirai Great Mother is much more like she's delivering information, she's speaking, she's preaching, she's saying something, she's delivering a blessing. So like there's this difference in their moods where you can see that Nami is like taken, overwhelmed with feeling at the journey that she's setting out upon, which is very good. Very fresh take, haha, get it, cause water. Yeah, Mirai are the best Astaya tribe because they've got the best colors and shape. Yeah, absolutely. Like, the Mirai are the coolest Astaya in the game. Because most of the Vastaya in the game, and I've complained about this before, just are fucking humans in animal costume, like with a little bit of animal, like fucking Zaya and Rakan, could not one of them have a beak? They're birds! Like, gee, anyway, there's a different discussion. Good card. I like it. That's what I'm trying to say. So, some gorgeous water rendering right here. Like, this is just, this is so like 1980s in a way. Like, this is sort of late 80s, early 90s kind of aesthetic of rendering a big, beautiful water splash where you have this, like, the water is almost folding over like petals of a flower, right? Like, if you've ever seen water splash in real life, you know that it doesn't look this neat. Like, this is very neat and tidy. This is like the water being very polite. In real life, the water just goes and flies out all over everywhere, but here it's being shaped into these lovely petals and folds and shapes, which is probably partly Nami's magic or whatever, but the aesthetic of it is one that reminds me of things like Sailor Moon back in the early days, and like sort of generally a very little bit of a magical girl aesthetic, a little bit of a Little Mermaid aesthetic that's going on there with the way that the water sort of conveniently shapes its way out and looks like this sort of soft, pleasant, giving, almost silk-like folds, right? Rather than being this big mass of just wet molecules, which is like, which I think is really nice. Like, it has a really nice aesthetic, And it also sort of serves to underline the idea that Nami is, like, she's loved by the sea, right? Like, the water is her ally, it's her aid. It's not an antagonistic force that she has to overcome. It's a thing that aids her on her journey, which I quite like. Why is it, by the way? Why is it that every time I start streaming, I immediately get snotty? Why is that? Right. So, Nami here, as people are mentioning it in chat, by the way, also, as Nami here is kind of slender, right? Like, she's kind of a slender, sleek little thing. Like, she's got a very long tail, if you pay attention. Like, she has a really long mermaid tail. But here, she seems to have put on, I mean, I don't mean to be rude, but she seems to have put on a pound or two. Like, she seems to be a little bit more bottom-heavy here. And I don't necessarily think that that's a storytelling thing. I think it's just a compositional thing. I don't think, like, some people in chat are suggesting that maybe this is like a storytelling thing where it's like, oh, this is Nami after 5 years into her journey when she's grown up a little bit more, and so she's a little bit more mature. I'm not sure that's the case. I think this is just a compositional thing, because look at, if Nami here had been very slender, I think visually she would just have looked like another ribbon of water. Like, I think if she'd been very slender, she wouldn't have stood out properly from these slender ribbons of water flowing all the way around her. I think it's just a decision on the behalf of the artist to frame her in a slightly thicker way, in order to make her stand out and be visible against the shape language of like the rippling water around her. Like, I don't think it's necessarily a storytelling thing. I think it's also just the angle, because like, if you actually trace the line of the thing, it's like, it's not that much thicker than her base form, like than her level 1 form. It's not that much, but because of the way that these things overlap with each other, because of the way that the hip armor and the fins or whatever they are, like, that flap out here, the way they overlap, it makes it look thicker than it is. But either way, like, I kind of prefer this thick Nami, because like, it's just, like, well, sort of. I mean, I kind of go both ways, because like, I kind of like the idea of a mermaid that has, because like, a lot of fish are really fat, because they kind of have to be. They live in the sea. It's cold down there. And I kind of like the idea of a mermaid that has, like, the human form has this sort of human petiteness, but then the lower half is, like, much more like a whale shark or something large. But I think for Nami, it's more appropriate if she's very sleek and slender, because she's supposed to be this little slight sort of young girl fantasy hero going off on their first quest. So, like, I don't know, character design-wise, I could go either way. But anyway, framing. So the framing here is interesting, because there isn't an explicit frame. Like, it's not like in a lot of the cards where there's a very obvious frame in the card itself. What there is, though, is light. And the light here, like, you can see this moon, this shaft of moonlight coming down from above, right there. It's not very starkly visible, but it is right there, highlighting her, like, lightening up her background. So you can see the background behind her here. It's very light, right? Like, it's basically sort of this very sparse gray, bluish gray, which gives her a lot to contrast against, right? So she has much more contrast, she has much more saturation, she has much more color, so she's very well outlined against this very slight, sort of bright background in a way that she wouldn't be if her head was, like, over here. Against all this raging nonsense of the water, she'd be much less visible. But because we have this flat, featureless background behind her here, she stands out really beautifully. And again, she's the only thing with a face. The human brain goes, I see a face! And then that's the main character of the image. Pretty simple like that. So that's, like, very nice. And I really like the swoops. I like the shape language that's being used here, like the S-curves that flow throughout Nami's entire form, and that also inform, like, the behavior of the water. It's just really gorgeous, like, with all the little sparkles. It's so extra. Like, they went a little bit, like, just the sparkles on the water, and it looks, like, very beautiful and very pretty in a way that's just kind of a little, again, like I said, a little bit 90s anime style, in a way that I really appreciate. I really like it. I like the sparkliness and the prettiness of it all. Because, like, she's a mermaid, so of course she's supposed to be. Yeah, beautiful art. Like, I really like this art. It's really gorgeous. And also, I like the spell art. Like, I really like the way that this thing is painted. Just like that almost sort of a little bit cartoonish in the way that it's almost like you can see a strong outline around everything, but it's not outlined, it's painted in a way that's just really gorgeous. Like, I really like the way they've rendered these spell cards. It's just really nice, pretty use of color, lots of nice gradients flowing over top of it. It's just real pretty. It's just, I would love a print of this, because that's just a really pretty depiction of magic water. Anyway. How's chat doing? I'm trying to go fast a little bit. In case you can't tell, I'm just talking a little bit fast. I'm trying to, and failing, but I'm trying, because I want to get through all these cards before, like, 5 hours. Is there... Oh, can't believe they didn't give her a thigh gap when she's so thick. Oh, we'll talk about mermaids with thigh gaps later, by the way. They've got one of those. Your content inspired me to learn to draw. Learn to draw the monster himbos Riot won't give us. Well, you're doing the Lord's work, Josh Young. By the way, didn't we learn from interaction that Nami is in a polygamous relationship? Yes. Yes, she is. Nami has a girlfriend and a boyfriend all at the same time. And that girlfriend and boyfriend are also girlfriend and boyfriend to each other, which is very cool. Let's see if I can find them, actually, because it's the Mirai Songstress is Nami's girlfriend, this lady right here, and then it is the... No. What's he called? Shit. He's a 4-cost, I think. There is, the Abyssal Guard. And then this guy is their boyfriend. And they are in what seems to be a polyamorous relationship with each other, which is very cool. And a writer confirmed on Twitter that it's because the Mirai just don't have the same concept of monogamy that a lot of the land-dwelling species have. Like, it's not really, they don't think of themselves as being in a polyamorous relationship. They're just like, no, this is just like a normal relationship where we live. Sky, you need to tell us when you do these. I would have had snacks done. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I've been trying to find time to do this stream all week, and I just couldn't find time for it. What is polygamy? Well, okay, so polygamy and polyamory are not exactly the same thing. Polygamy means being married to more than one person, like being in a sort of structured relationship of marriage with more than one person. Polyamory means being romantically attracted to more than one person. Or polygamy means being a romantic relationship with more than one person. Polyamory is just the state of being capable of feeling romantic attraction to more than one person simultaneously. What do you call a Mirai love triangle? Bermuda Triangle. That's pretty good. So, moving on to Tristana. There's not a lot to say about her in terms of her design, because it's pretty much exactly the same design that she has in the regular League of Legends game. So that's, like, not a lot to say there. In terms of framing and aesthetic, like, you can see there's not an explicit frame for Tristana exactly, but she's separated in the frame from the other characters. She's the only face that we've really got besides the whatever the hell this thing is that's trying to come through the YORDLE portal. And we've got... like the same sort of contrast and focus thing that we've talked about before, where every other character, like if you look at them, they're sort of a little bit more roughly painted, they're a little bit more sort of out of focus, as it were, whereas Tristana is fully rendered and extremely sharp in her outlines, so that makes her stand out as a main character. We've got the bright sort of washed out background against her highly saturated, very high contrast form, helping her stand out as a character, and she's also just the biggest character in the screen. Like, that's another way that you can make a character the central character, is just to make them the biggest character in the card, or in the art. She takes up like a full, what, a quarter? Yeah, just about a quarter of the image is dedicated entirely to Tristana's form, and then everyone else gets to share the rest. So that's how we highlight her as a character. So compositionally, I don't think there's that many interesting things going on here. There's one interesting thing in... You see this tree branch, this tree trunk that they're running along, like the way that kind of leads the image, so that you can see, you can get the sense of, like, Tristana is, like, behind these people as she's beckoning this person forward. Like, so there's a little bit of that flow of the storytelling happening in the composition that way. But other than that, it's just a perfectly decent card. Like, it's maybe not the greatest representation of Tristana, I think. it's sort of like, from a storytelling perspective, it focuses on Tristana as the leader of the Bandle Gunners, right? Like, she's leading her troops into battle with the whatever the hell this thing is. And it's sort of trying to set her up as that. I don't necessarily think it's the best. I don't know. It doesn't excite me, is what I'm saying. Like, I don't look at this and go, yeah, fuck yeah, Tristana, yeah. I just, oh, hey, Tristana is here. Which is what I like a lot more about the second, the level 2 splash art, is here, like, more specifically, you can see that she's the leader in front of the Bandle Gunner. She's just used her rocket jump. She's about to lay down brutal punishment on, again, whatever the hell this thing is. And you can see that she's in front of her troops, like Teemo down here with his little blowpipe doing his thing. They're shooting acorns at it. Here you can see, like, this is much more Tristana as an active leader in the front of everything. And this works a lot better for me, frankly, in terms of making her the central character of the image and the leader of the Bandle Gunners. And also here, you can see a very clever little thing. We have the light of the Bandle portal, right? Like the light that this thing is coming through, highlighting Tristana in this bright orange, which is also coincidentally the same color as the color of fire, the color of, like, blasting stuff to pieces with explosions. So that's used to highlight her very specifically, and contrasts, like, this warm, golden, yellow color, in contrast with the blues, in contrast with the sort of these pale burgundies, and, like, sort of very, very differently purplish colors of the background. It highlights her just brilliantly right in the center of the frame, in a way that you can see with Teemo, he's not really highlighted by that light, he's just saturated with it, and these characters have no golden highlights on them whatsoever, they just have the blues of the background. So Tristana gets highlighted literally just with light here in a way that centers her out as a central character really effectively. And then, of course, also the other things. She's basically the only character with a really visible face. Like, we have this down here, this misshapen nonsense. We have Teemo's little eyes, kinda. But she's the only one where there's, like, a really clearly, strongly visible face that draws our attention. So that works really well. Like, this is really nicely put together, and this feels much more like Tristana in action, like Tristana doing her Tristana thing, than this one where it's just like, hey, she's saying she's going to a place. I also like the Buster shot. I just like Tristana's joy and delight at blowing stuff up. Like, she would get along with Ziggs a lot better than she thinks, I think. Speaking of whom, I do like the storyline of Ziggs and his cards, because the storyline of Ziggs is that the inspector is coming to visit his factory, his workplace, his laboratory where he blows everything to pieces. And this is the safety inspector, and if the safety inspector doesn't give them a pass, they'll get shut down. So Ziggs is like, hide the explosions! Blow them out somewhere else! Like, he's trying to sort of get through this inspection, like, okay, at first he's like, okay, we're gonna try and hide the explosions so he doesn't see them. And then later he's like, fuck it, let's just blow everything up! And then he passes because the explosions are just so impressive that the inspector is like, you did well, son. I just adore the storyline of these two characters. And I think that's pretty much why the inspector is so front and center on Ziggs' own art. Like, he's the secondary character in the image. So Ziggs is over here, like, showing off, over here, we're blowing up everything that we can find. And over there, we're blowing up all the other stuff. It's like he's giving this tour of, like, just demonstrating how horrifyingly dangerous everything he does is. And you can see the inspector over here, like, looking at him, being like, yeah, well, I see, son. So, like, you get the sense of, like, Ziggs is like, I see no problem with any of this whatsoever. Woohoo! Which is just sort of a delightful feeling. Of course, Ziggs also has this fucking horrifying mouth character design, which he shares with the inspector. And I can't help but feel, like, I don't know if this is, like, meant to be explicit, but it feels like there's supposed to be some sort of relation between them. Like, that Ziggs is, like, his nephew or something. Like, it's nothing that's explicitly done in any of the, but just the character design similarities between them just makes me feel that way. But then we have, of course, Ziggs' followers in the background doing their explosions. And, like, flamethrower blowing stuff up. We'll get to the arsenal and this thing a little bit later. But, yeah, in terms of framing, the explosions are going off directly behind Ziggs. And you can see that, like, if you sort of trace the radius of the explosion, like the center of where all the explosions are happening, they all converge right behind Ziggs' head and radiate out from there, which is a clever little way to put him in the center of all of it and also sort of imply that he's the cause of all of these explosions. And then the secondary character being the safety inspector, who's, like, you can see Ziggs is connected with his arm, and they're overlapping a little bit, but he's lower in the image, he's a little bit smaller, and he's looking at Ziggs. Like, his attention is focused on Ziggs, which makes Ziggs a main character in the image. Just lovely characters. I love their little storyline. Like, I love their I love their stupid nonsense. It's so good. It's important we make a good impression. The new safety inspector is stopping by. You know what that means? No more explosions. What? No! It means explode things where you can't see them. No more explosions. Are you crazy? So good. And here we have the end. The end of the whole thing, where everything just blows sky high to Kingdom Come. And Ziggs is like, whee! And the inspector, for some fucking reason, gives them a pass. I don't know, YORDLE stuff. And oddly enough, though, like, this art is more interesting than the previous one, because the previous one is, like, it's mostly just characters. Like, we have the character here, we have the character here, character there, and then just explosions, like, just a lot of orange and yellow in the background. So, theoretically, that's a less interesting image, whereas in the level 2, there's a bunch of interesting stuff going on, because here we have this fisheye lens perspective, and that's props to the artist, by the way. Painting things, like, painting shit with a fisheye lens effect is hard. Like, painting it to look sort of reasonably in a way that's convincing to the eye, as though we have this sort of GoPro-esque fisheye lens effect, is difficult. That's a difficult goddamn thing to do, and they manage it, which, like, absolutely want to give props for. But the art itself is, to me, in a lot of ways, a little bit less interesting, because so much of it, like, so much of the background, because Ziggs is the character in the foreground, because everything else is so far away, it seems to be there's a lot of desaturation. Like, none of these colors really pop. Even Ziggs himself is kind of desaturated as he's flying into the natural light away from the explosion. So, like, there's a lot less visual impact in this image, unfortunately, I feel. Where I feel like either we could have pulled the background away a little bit further so that Ziggs is higher up, and, like, we'd get to see more of just the size of the explosion that he's made, or that we were pulled in a little bit closer to everything, where Ziggs is getting launched rather than being in the middle of his launch at the end, and fill up more of the frame with the explosion and stuff like that. That would make it harder to sort of render these little guys out of the side holding up scores for how good Ziggs' big explosion is. But, like, it feels like we're sort of at a halfway point here where none of the most interesting options were taken, and we sort of ended up in a thing that's fine, but it's just like, I feel like it's Ziggs. Like, it's this level 2. There could be more explosion, there could be more impact, there could be more, like, big, loud, bright stuff happening in the frame. That's sort of not there, which is like, but that's a minor complaint. So, Ziggs, why is he the main character? Well, because he's the biggest character in the frame, because he's the closest to the camera, and because, well, he's saturated, he's contrasted, where everything else in the frame, as I talked about, is a little bit more washed out. Simple things. We've talked about these already. Let's see. Neither of those were very interesting, I don't think, which means we can move on to Poppy. I need to blow my nose, though, because I'm snotty. Why am I snotty? Yeah. Right. Let's see. The Harbo, considering the inspector calls him son and reveals that Ziggs' real name is Sigmund, a headcanon that the inspector is his dad. Well, we actually knew that Ziggs' real name is Sigmund long before this. Heimerdinger has called him Sigmund before, so we know that. But yeah, like, I headcanon the idea that the inspector is, like, related to him somehow. The judges in the Ziggs level 2 are priceless. Yeah, they're very funny. Like, I quite like those. Anyway, moving on to the hero of Demacia, Dear Poppy. The hero who doesn't know that she's a hero. As the thing itself says, humility is a mark of heroism, but many historians would agree that Poppy is kind of pushing it. So if you don't know Poppy's story, she is... like, she's a YORDLE who was wandering the world for a while, didn't really know what she wanted, didn't know who she was, what she wanted to be. She ran into a dude named Orlon, who was leading a bunch of refugees towards a settlement that they were trying to found where they could be safe from the Rune Wars. That settlement became Demacia. After, like, several hundred years later, that settlement would become Demacia, but Poppy was present at the founding of Demacia, and when Orlan died, he passed his hammer onto her, telling her that it belongs to a true hero of Demacia. And then Poppy was like, oh, it belongs to a true hero of Demacia? I should go and find them! Because she doesn't think that she could possibly be the true hero of Demacia. So she's like, my quest is to find the owner of this hammer, the rightful bearer who will use it to be a hero of Demacia. And so she's wandered around for like 1,000 years, or at least several hundred years, trying to find the hero of Demacia and being way too humble to realize that the hero of Demacia is her. So that's her story, and that's why humility is a mark of heroism, but many historians would agree that Poppy is kind of pushing it. Like, stop being humble, lady. The hammer is yours. It's been 400 years. Yeah, that's why she's always talking about heroes, Coda. That's why. So, framing and composition. Poppy is saturated. She has more contrast. She's a little bit darker. She's very well sort of separated from the background by virtue, like you can see the bards here in the background and the cavalier. They're all kind of washed out with the bright yellow of the campfire, whereas Poppy is like highlighted. She has these gorgeous like edge light highlights around, especially her hair and her face, and then she's like just very well separated from the rest of the action, and she's a big character in the screen. Same stuff we've talked about before. I really like the scene here because, again, remember, Poppy's thing is humility, right? Like, Poppy does not put herself above others. She refuses to think of herself as a hero. She refuses to think of herself as important in any way. So how is Poppy framed relative to these other characters? Well, she's kind of sitting below them, actually. Like, they're all sitting elevated on this log, and she's sitting, like, closer to the ground, more down to earth, quite literally. And you can see the cavalier, this guy who we'll talk about later, who's very pompous and very full of himself. He's sitting the highest above everybody else. These dudes are singing songs about, like, YORDLE's doing hero stuff. They're bards. And she's sitting, like, way down there on the ground, just polishing her hammer for some reason. Like, just cleaning it, just keeping it nice for the hero. And so, like, nice song, guys. We're doing great. I bet the next quest will be fun. Like, you can see the humility on her. YORDLEs live very long. Oh, yeah. Poppy, like, YORDLEs are immortal. Like, they do not have a natural lifespan. They can be killed, but they do not have a natural lifespan. They stick around. They're pretty damn good at sticking around. And here we come to the first art in the game that I really kind of don't like very much. Like, there's good stuff here. There's some good things happening. Like, I quite like the pose on Poppy. It's really dynamic. It's really powerful. I like the composition, like, where everyone else is sort of shying away from the big beast, and Poppy is the only one who's leaping towards it. That's all good. What I don't like about this card is the decision to, like, fully take, like, 70% of the card, 60 maybe, and just cover it up in this nothing. Like, just the monster. The idea that, like, the thing it's supposed to do, it's supposed to make the monster look big, right? It's supposed to make it big and scary and, like, make Poppy more heroic for confronting it. But the framing of it it's because they want the framing of Poppy in the front with her companions in the back cowering away, being frightened. She's standing out in front. She's doing hero shit, right? Then we want the monster to be really, really big so that it's a big threat that Poppy is confronting. And it's kind of trying to have its cake and eat it too, because when you try to make the monster so big, you just take up a lot of the frame with this, which is just flat color. Like, it's a little bit feather rendered, but it's just flat color. And it's just wasted space in the image, I feel like. And it doesn't really make the monster look that big. It doesn't make it look that threatening. It's just kind of blank space that doesn't really do anything for the storytelling. All the actual stuff is happening, like, here. This is everything that's actually happening in the image happens here. And all of this shit is just, like, extra. And it just doesn't do the thing that it's supposed to do, I don't think. So, like, this is probably the first card art in Legends of Runeterra I don't really like, just because of the compositional decisions. But, you know, it's not a catastrophe or anything. Like, you can see when it's centered down, when we get into, like, the card crop for the art, it looks fine. It looks perfectly good, but the full art, don't really like those compositional choices. Because, like, the more traditional way to show, and this is, like, something that they do in this thing, the more traditional way to show that someone is a small hero confronting a a large enemy is to put the camera behind the person, low to the ground, looking up at them, and then have the monster itself be this big towering presence in the frame. But they kind of can't do that because Poppy needs to face the camera for the card art, and so like that storytelling thing is it's really hard to pull off. Like it's a difficult thing to do, and I just don't think they really managed it very well here, unfortunately.